Are we in a housing bubble? The warning signs look all too familiar. Escalating home prices have both buyers and sellers really worried that the market is just too good to be true, and agents all across the United States are getting bombarded with the same exact question. Are we in a housing bubble? This is the reason I'm doing this video, so that you can decide your own investing strategy moving forward. So give me a thumbs up if you're good with that. So I want to take a deep dive into the main economic indicators and what the impacts of inflation will do. This can help you see what will unfold over the next 6 months and the next few years. And many of you have been watching YouTube videos, listening to the boy who's cried wolf, and he's been yelling winter's coming for the last 3 years. All the while, the exact opposite's been happening. No tidal wave of foreclosures, prices never went down, and they just kept going up. So don't kick yourself. Just understand there are 3 factors that suggest that we're not in a bubble. Now, I'm breaking this down for you because it's up to you, so you can figure out how you're going to navigate and develop your own investment strategy. So, what scenarios are unfolding right now? Multiple things are happening all at the same time. Much of the public is oblivious to what's actually happening right before their own eyes and not even aware of what's happening. You can either get crushed by inflation or win with inflation. But one undisclosed impact in the housing market that we're seeing right now is the coiled spring of baby boomers that are leaving their jobs. I've mentioned this before, but COVID started to unleash some of that. Many retirees were gainfully employed their whole entire life. They own the house outright, have some assets, and going forward, they're looking to buy a brand new home or even a second home. Now, this is really putting more pressure on the primary home buyers who are challenged to find a home. So there are 3 main indicators that are driving the markets. Part 1, the housing supply. Last year, home values appreciated on an average of 15% across the nation. Now, while this year's growth is not expected to match that, experts are saying they're predicting it's going to be closer to 6%, buyers and sellers are still worried that home prices are too high and that the depreciation is likely to follow. However, unlike the housing bubble from the mid-2000s, a major factor driving up home prices is that we're also in dire shortage of inventory. There's a balanced real estate market, which is normal, sits around 6 months. Today's market inventory levels is 1.9 months. Now, what this means is 1.9 months of inventory and we're out of homes to sell. So that means there's absolutely nothing out there. Now, you know that some houses are overpriced, and those probably will never sell, so that takes into consideration. But this is historically low amount of homes for sale. On top of that, the inventory has been declining for years now. We're currently sitting at less than 2 months of inventory. Now, I want you to understand that by comparison, inventory levels from 2005 through 2007 increased from 5 months to 11 months. That's vastly oversupply of homes and did not warrant the price appreciation that went along with it. So, throwing back into your high school economics class, the biggest driver of home appreciation, or price appreciation I should say, is the simple case of supply and demand. Hence, what we're seeing in today's market. Part number 2 is the housing demand. Now, if you remember the housing boom of the mid-2000s, you know how it was a crazy time in real estate. But Robert Schiller, also a fellow at the Yale School of Management Finance, he summed it up in one phrase, and it was called irrational exuberance. And what that means is buying and selling frenzy that contributed to the market collapse back then was fueled by not tactful financial decisions, but a countrywide fear of missing out, FOMO, right? So the mortgage industry just fed into that frenzy. They just kept on going along with it. Anybody want a mortgage? Hey, you want one? If you're breathing, we'll give you one. And that's what happened. It made it easy for people to obtain home loans, much higher than they could actually even afford. Sometimes it wasn't a matter of, hey, can you afford this? It was a matter of, hey, do you want a home loan? Not in today's market at all. Today's market, real estate market that is, the demand is a very real thing. And lending standards, trying to get a loan, you're going to have to jump through more hoops to get a loan. So it's become even tighter since that crash. Plus, we have inflation in every sector of the economy. Along with escalating rent that's happening all across the United States, Americans are opting for financial stability that homeownership offers. Now, even with interest rates rising, were still cheaper than the historic national average of 8% over time, the historic national average. These factors, coupled with low mortgage rates, make purchasing a home a really good financial decision for the long term. So it's not only the demand that's really a very real thing, but it's also a smart long-term plan. Now, part 3 of this is the equity, and I had mentioned this in the beginning that a lot of baby boomers have equity in their homes and they own their homes outright. But this is the part that's very important, because following the housing and economic crash of 2008, economists, financiers, and real estate industry experts have combed through the data to figure out why the entire system crumbled the way it did. And most will agree that one of the biggest pieces of the catastrophic equation came down to this: equity. Or in reality, the lack of it. Back then, you could get a mortgage and you didn't have to have much skin in the game. Today, it's all about having the equity and having some money down, and it's that sort of thing. So back in the mid-2000s, saw a massive wave of homeowners cashing out equity in their homes. They were taking home equity loans. Today, it's not as prevalent. In short, they were using their homes like an ATM machine. Some people were buying cars and things that went down in value, and of course they got loaded up with debt. So some could not afford those finer things in life, and they were financing it through their house. This led to a lot of negative equity situations where the amount someone owed on their home was far more than what their house was really even worth. What we're seeing today is home price keeps on appreciating. And many of the foreclosures back then and short sales that followed had depreciating home values nationwide. Now today, it's a much different equity picture. The cash out refinance volume over the last 3 years is less than a third of what it was compared to the 3 years before the crash of the 2000s. Very small by comparison. Plus, the escalating appreciation that homeowners gained was an average of $56,700 in equity in 2021 alone, just in 1 year. So as prices continue to rise, equity will as well. This is positive equity that puts perspective in the current housing situation in a much stronger financial place, minimizing the risk of foreclosure and stabilizing home values all across the United States. So the bottom line, the only way to understand the direction of the market and what will happen in the next 6 months or even the next several years is to please understand no one has a crystal ball, so there's no guarantees, but just understand this. You keep hearing about inflation or even hyperinflation into the future. I just want you to know that in uncertain times, the timing and the things that you look at is the data and the fundamental numbers. Then compare this to what happened in the past, and then you can make sense of what's going to happen in the future. Many people were not alive during the 1970s and early 80s to see what happened with inflation. And many don't know that inflation lasts for years. Many don't know that the cost of everyday stuff keeps on going higher. Many don't understand this. Just because you can't afford it doesn't make prices drop. Yes, you can either get crushed from inflation or you can win with inflation. Now, currently, there's a huge backlog of houses that are approved for constructions with construction permits that are yet to still be built, as builders are struggling still with supply chain shortages of windows and siding and roofing and lumber, and this is on top of more expensive costs for materials and labor. And I understand this is very frustrating. Like I said in the beginning of this video, unfortunately, some of the public has been listening to the boy who's cried wolf, or winter's coming. So if you're watching YouTube, you know who I'm talking about, but it's unfortunate for them because they could be kicking themselves for not jumping in when they could. But it's up to you to figure out how you're going to navigate this super complex housing market. So I hope you find this info helpful to help you navigate this challenging market. If you have questions or any thoughts, please comment below. Let me know what your thoughts are. If you like this content, go ahead and subscribe because there's 1,000 videos here on this channel. I hope wherever you are and whatever you're doing, you're having a fantastic day, and we'll see you in the next video. Take care, guys.